is the day we have been given, and let us be glad by rising in body and or in spirit to sing Honey in the Rock with the DC Labor Chorus.
Hopefully we have the lyrics on the screen for you, so we hope you'll join in.
Thank you, members of the DC Labor Chorus. It is always a joy to welcome you back to Cedar Lane every Labor Day weekend. All right. Of course, now we welcome you back to Cedar Lane more than just the Labor Day weekend. So we're glad to be on this journey with you. Good morning. Welcome to Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Abhi Janamanchi, one of the ministers serving this liberal religious community. And I realized this morning, beginning my 7th year with you. I know. Thank you. I know. Time flies. It sure does. But it continues to be an honor and a blessing to be serving this amazing religious community. We welcome you on this Labor Day weekend as we begin a new church year together. Together, where we commit ourselves to explore the eternal nurture community and build a more just world.
Please know that whoever you are, wherever you are from, whomever you love, and whatever your gender identity, life circumstance, or immigration status, you are welcome here.
A special welcome to those who are joining our service online, whether in the moment or catching up with us later. We are glad to have you with us as part of our worshiping community. And if you're new to Cedar Lane, we have a small gift for you. So if you feel comfortable doing so, please raise your hand so we may see, recognize, and welcome you to our worship this morning. We have a few guests who are bold enough to raise their hands. Please keep your hands raised so our ushers may find you. Let us give our guests a warm Cedar Lane welcome. We have another special guest today who I will introduce in a little bit. Now,
Please join us after the service for coffee and conversation. We look forward to meeting you and getting to know you.
and at this time, I'd like to draw your attention to the announcements page that you may have picked up on your way in. We have quite a few events happening starting this week and into the month, and we'll be highlighting a few. But before that, Mary?
In this caring community, the pastoral visitors are an extension of the ministry team. Ann Meyer is today's on-call pastoral visitor. She will be available during and after the service at the Joys and Sorrows Candles table. Please reach out to her if you'd like support after the service. Also, there will be a memorial service for Dorothy Britt today at 2:30 in the chapel.
That's right. Thank you. Today is our question box service, which is a unique Unitarian Universalist tradition that happens in many UU congregations, where the congregation has the opportunity to ask questions of their ministers. And the questions are intended to stump the minister, basically, and tend to be on a broad range of themes and topics, especially about Unitarian Universalism, UU history, theology, polity, about the congregation, and of course about what's happening in this broken and beautiful world of ours. So if you have a question that you haven't already written and dropped in that basket, feel free to do so during the service, and we will be collecting them, and then our worship associates will sort them and then give them to me. So we're glad you're here for this particular service. Also, our in-gathering, which is our traditional coming back when we move to two services at 9 and 11, starting next Sunday, September 8th. How many services, friends? What time? Thank you. Please let your friends know so that they show up on time. And this is when we bring waters that we may have collected on our summer journeys or from our kitchen sink or our garden, and bring to mingle them as we come together as a religious community. Now, this time we're also going to be doing the backpack blessing, which we offer to our children and adults every year as part of the in-gathering services. So if you have a backpack, bring it along. We'll figure out a way to do both without dousing the backpacks with water. Look forward to seeing you next Sunday. And I hear the NPR interview with Doña Rosa aired this morning on Weekend Edition. If you did not catch it, I'm sure it will be online on npr.org later today. So I hope you'll listen to it. I hear good things about it. So looking forward to listening to it myself. Which brings me to our sanctuary work, which we have now been engaged in for more than 8 months. And we continue to recruit, train, equip, and support volunteers. It takes about 275 people each month to do the work of sanctuary. And we're always in need of new people who are willing to commit their time, energy to support this important work. So we have some trainings happening, and I draw your attention to the dates and the times on your announcements page. Hope you'll consider being part of this important ministry. And last but not least, I would like to now recognize and welcome Dana Edwards, who is going to be our half-time intern minister for the next 2 years. Dana is here with her children this morning and is a third-year student at Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago, one of our Unitarian Universalist seminaries. Before going into seminary, Dana was a lifespan religious educator for many years, serving congregations here in Maryland, including our sister congregation, Rockville, as their Director of Religious Education. She brings a very strong background in education and religious education and a deep commitment to social justice. And it is a joy to welcome you, Dana, to this wonderful, crazy community. And now let us take a moment to greet our neighbors, especially our guests this morning. During the offering. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near. Let us open our hearts to love,
our minds to reason,
our souls to joy,
and our lives to service.
Amazed by the miracle of life,
Grateful for the gift of community,
inspired by the power of living faith,
we are gathered here.
Come, let us worship together. As Mary Farrar, Ezra Town, and Carolyn Morrissey kindle the chalice, symbol of our gathered community, I invite us to rise in body and/or in spirit to speak in unison the words that are on screen. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our power to seek with honesty, to heal with love, to help with compassion, to bless with joy to serve the spirit of justice in the fullness of community. Please remain rising for the song Solidarity Forever.
One of our anthems. So please sing along. We're going to start with the chorus.
This morning, we acknowledge the role of worship associates in our congregation, trained lay leaders who collaborate and work closely with the ministers to develop, support, and help lead Sunday worship. Our worship associates make an important commitment to the congregation when they take on this sacred task. They are, in a very real sense, representatives of our congregation and our Unitarian Universalist faith, as they learn more about worship and lend their particular gifts and sensibilities to the creation and leading of worship. So this morning we attest to the enormous value they bring not only to worship, but to our lives as well. So today, we come together to dedicate and commission the Worship Associate team. But before we do, I'd like to take a moment to recognize and thank Mary Farrar, Carolyn Morrissey, and Ezra Town, who are completing 3 years as Worship Associates. Would you please rise and... Mary, Ezra, Carolyn, we are deeply grateful and appreciative of the many gifts you brought and shared with us as part of our worship life, and we will miss your regular presence among us up here, but not over there. But we also believe that once a worship associate, always a worship associate. So they now join a growing cloud of witnesses of experienced worship associates. 7 worship associates are continuing to serve actively: Cami Boyle, Val Carter, Wangari Kamau, Michael Torin, Leslie Wasson, Stephanie Williams, and Jared Wilson. I invite them to come forward onto the chancel now. And joining this incredible group is a new group of worship associates: Fran Flieger, Jessica Sawyer, Babs Ricketts, and Natalia Dunn. I invite you to come forward and join your colleagues. Friends, on this day, we commission you, and in some cases, recommission you as the Cedar Lane Worship Associate team. We honor the important ministry you share with us and ask if you are ready to fulfill your responsibilities of being worship associates for the upcoming year. Do you commit to engage in this ministry with joy, openness, and integrity, upholding the values and principles of our Unitarian Universalist faith in celebration and service of life? If so, please say, "We will." We will. Thank you. In affirmation of your call to serve, we recognize and commission you with joy and gratitude to offer your gifts of creativity and authenticity, to model commitment to our vision and mission, and join the ministry team in the shared ministry of worship. May it be so. Thank you.
Once was a Union maid who never was afraid of the goons and the thieves and around. She always stood her ground. Oh, you can't scare me. I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union. Oh, you can't scare me. I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union till the day I die. This Union maid was wise to the tricks of the company spies. She never got fooled by company stool. She'd always organize. She'd always get her way. When she struck for higher pay, she'd show her card to the company guard, and this is what she'd say. Oh, you can't scare me. I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union. Oh, you can't scare me. I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union till the day I die. Oh, you can't scare me. I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union. Oh, you can't scare me. I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union till the day I die. Women who want to be free, take a little tip from me. Break out of that mold we've all been sold. You've gotta fight in history. Fight for women's rights. With workers must unite. Fight Mother Jones. Move those boats to the front of every fight. Oh, you can't scare me. I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union. Oh, you can't scare me. I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union till the day I die.
We gather in this sacred space of community to find strength, the spiritual, emotional, and even physical strength to face the many challenges of our lives. We gather in this sacred space of community to be held as we grieve and as we celebrate. When I hold up my arms, I invite you to say, "We hold you in our hearts." If you are living through the small and extraordinary milestones of life, we hold you in our hearts. If parenting is your spiritual practice, we hold you in our hearts. If you live with or care for someone with grief or chronic pain, we hold you in our hearts. If you are struggling with illnesses seen and unseen, with mental illness or addictions, we hold you in our hearts. If you have suffered abuse or injustice, we hold you in our hearts. We mourn the passing of Cedar Lane member Esther Fox, who died on August 9th in Hingham, Massachusetts. We send healing wishes to Melissa Ferguson, who is recovering from ankle surgery. We celebrate with Jeff and Betsy Binks and their grandson Tristan, who celebrated the marriage of Valerie Binks to Angel Ortiz on Saturday. We hold you in our hearts. Our caring extends beyond Cedar Lane to others whose lives are lost or whose lives are impacted by violence and calamities in our world, including the protesters in Hong Kong who are in their 13th week of protests. We're concerned about the safety and well-being of the people of the Bahamas who are bracing themselves for Hurricane Dorian, expected to make landfall later tonight. And we hold in our hearts the people affected by the shooting in West Texas. We hold you in our hearts. May these friends of ours, our companions in the world, and all that lives unspoken in our hearts be held in the embrace of prayer and by a love that will not let us go.
Last Sunday, bells rang simultaneously across the nation for 4 minutes to honor the forced arrival of 20 Africans who landed in 1619 at Point Comfort in Virginia at the end of a grueling, dehumanizing transatlantic voyage, and also to commemorate 400 years of American history. 1619. It is a year that is just as foundational to the United States of America as 1776. The 2 years represent the contradiction that lies at the heart of our country. From its very inception, the U.S. has proclaimed itself the land of the free. From its very inception, the U.S. has been built on unfreedom. It is, like the late Toni Morrison observed, the presence of the unfree lies within the heart of the democratic experiment. And so I invite us to come together, uniting our minds, bodies, spirits, as a community of remembrance, of mourning, lament, and reconciliation. Would you join me in the spirit of prayer? Nameless one of many names, Spirit of life and love, we pause to remember those who have suffered and continue to suffer from systemic racism. We pause to remember those who even now are victims of modern-day slavery in whatever form it exists. We pause to lament the centuries of suffering and wrenching grief of slavery and racism in our land. O Spirit of justice and mercy, in our struggle for justice, strengthen us when we grow weary. Renew our zeal and commitment when we feel hopeless and helpless. Equip us as we challenge systems and ideologies to end racism in our communities. Show us ways to speak and act that repair the devastations of many generations so that healing can begin. Help us to work together for a just, inclusive, and peaceful society where all can live with respect, dignity, safety, and freedom. And may we dedicate ourselves to addressing injustice, oppression, discrimination in any form, and recommit ourselves to doing the hard work of reconciliation that remains. In the name of all that is holy, life-affirming, life-sustaining, we say, Shalom, Salam, Om Shanti, Amen. Blessed be. As we enter the silence together, I invite those among us who are mourning a loss or marking the anniversary of the loss of a loved one to rise in body and/or in spirit. May it be so. Blessed be. Our offering that sustains the mission and ministry of Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church, that in so many ways helps us to make love real, to make love work in our community and in the larger world, will now be given and received with gratitude. We welcome back the DC Labor Chorus to offer a song by our own Steve Jones, the Love Songs Medley. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
Love is the unstoppable force. Join us, we're about to begin. History's on our side, we'll do it again. There's nothing on this earth that can stop us. Love is such a powerful thing. We will conquer hate, and we will sing.
Miranda, we went to Highlander. They say that is one powerful song. They say the whole world will sing it long after we're gone.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. An injury to one is an injury to all. If you call me, I will come. I will catch you if you fall. Because alone we are weak. Together we stand tall. An injury to one is an injury to all. We are the voices of rebellion, the writing on the wall. We sing the songs of freedom, a witness to the fall. We bring you the love songs on the liberation wall. The songs that heal and remind us what we're fighting for. An injury to one. Injury to one. All I will come. If you call me, I will come. I'll catch you if you fall. Alone we are weak. Together we stand tall. An injury to one. Injury to one. Injury to one.
for all that we bring and share to make this a beloved community of spirit. May we be grateful. Thank you. All right, here we go. I always love this service. First of all, it's wonderful to receive questions from the congregation to kind of know what's on your mind and in your heart as we journey together, especially in these troubled and troubling times. But it's also, to me, goes to one of the foundational aspects of our spiritual tradition. We call ourselves to be a faith of seekers. And in fact, one of our hymns celebrates to question is an answer. So when ministers share their thoughts from the pulpit, it is not looked upon as a definitive answer, somehow that we are the experts here to impart wisdom into your empty minds and fill it in so you know what to believe or how to think, but instead it is an opportunity for us to really engage and live into the questions, the intimate and ultimate questions of life and existence, which is the Unitarian Universalist way of being religious, a way that attracted me to this faith, to be on this journey now over 25 years ago. So I always see this to be a sacred opportunity to engage, and as I always do, I eat up a lot of time without necessarily answering any of your questions, which is also part of what I like to do. That said, why do we call it worship? What or who are we worshiping? It's a great question to start off, because we do call this worship, but not in the traditional sense. If anything, we go back to the ancient meaning of worship, which comes from the Anglo-Saxon word worthshippen, which means to celebrate things of worth. Imagine that. That's what worship means, to celebrate things of worth. And so we gather every Sunday to celebrate things of worth, or as the Reverend Von Ogden Vogt once put it, for the celebration of life, which includes joy and sorrow, disappointment and achievement, milestones and passages. That is the work we do when we gather for worship here. Isn't a sermon supposed to be like a lecture, to teach us something? Why does the order of celebration say reflection? Well, I think I answered part of it in my intro itself, but let me just expand a little bit as to why I prefer to use reflection instead of sermon. It's partly because I come from a tradition that doesn't do sermons. First of all, we don't do worship. In the Hindu tradition, we don't go to temple to worship, we go for darshan, which in Sanskrit means to see and to be seen by the holy, the divine. What a beautiful way, So I still struggle after all these years with that portion of the service and continue to find my own ways to engage with it. And one of the ways that I find it more accessible is when I call it a reflection. Because it is not a finished product that I bring before you. Most of the time it's half-baked. And it is not intended to somehow edify, educate, and illuminate and enlighten you somehow. I just feel it is an opportunity for us, for me and you, to join together in a reflective exercise of pondering sometimes the deeper meanings, sometimes engaging with difficult life questions, sometimes wrestling with things that we find in the world that are broken, that need more than just our sympathy. So to me, that's why I like to go with a reflection and to leave it open-ended so that the conversation continues beyond the service. How might change be considered a Unitarian Universalist value? And then in parentheses, many UUs I know seem to be resisting our own church changes. Ooh. Now, I didn't write these questions, friends. You did. So, change is inherent within Unitarian Universalism. We call ourselves a living tradition. And there is certainly a contradiction there, and also a tension. Because in our tradition, we say revelation is not sealed. Revelation is not sealable, as James Luther Adams, a UU theologian, put it. That revelation is continuous. That life is continually unfolding. That there are new learnings that invite us, actually challenge us, to bring an open-hearted, open-minded approach to how we engage with life and with religion. Now, we do a good job of it theologically, really well. We are far out in some ways, but we don't do as good a job institutionally. So I've sometimes described us as being unapologetically theologically progressive, but institutionally conservative. And that's something we have to wrestle with, not just at Cedar Lane, but in our movement as well, especially as we find ourselves struggling to figure out how we can be a religion for the 21st century, not try to repackage the religion that worked in the 1970s and 80s and the 90s and kind of bring it into the 21st century and somehow think that it would still work for both what we are confronted with as well as where people are. Because when we started, we were heretics, as Norman spoke to last Sunday, right? We were at the cutting edge. We were the same in the 20th century. Are we now? That's the question I ask us to ponder. India has a tradition of mysticism. Do you think there is a role for mysticism in Unitarian Universalism? Absolutely. As the Reverend Tom Owentoole says, we are free-thinking mystics with hands. That's a wonderful way to encapsulate the Unitarian Universalist approach. And if you look at our first source, we have 6 of them, 6 theological sources. The first source calls on us to witness to and engage with the transcending mystery and wonder that is a part of existence. And our own mission begins with exploring the eternal, which to me is a rousing invitation to be mystical. I love the idea of right relations, but why must they be called right? That's a good question. Yeah, I would love to call it left relations for so many reasons, especially after all, the heart is to the left, right? Yep. Say that next time when you encounter someone who claims to be from the religious right. Right relations is one term that is kind of in vogue in congregations, especially Unitarian Universalist congregations, but we don't have to say right relations. We could say a covenant of being in relationship together. Something that conveys the meaning of what is it that we are creating. It is basically a behavioral covenant, teaching us to be more intentionally engaged in creating and sustaining a religious community. And because covenant is such an integral part of Unitarian Universalism, that is the approach we choose to take. And that's why we have a congregational covenant of right relations, but we can call that a behavioral covenant. As Unitarian Universalists, we should care about the well-being of all people. Why isn't more emphasis on the congregation's social justice on opposing war, plus require change? That's a very good question. I think we should be looking at all aspects that invite us to live into our principles. Now, Unitarian Universalism has always had a rather tenuous relationship with war and pacifism. That's a whole service for us to look at the history of Unitarian Universalism. Well, we've had a strong tradition of anti-war, with people being engaged in all kinds of things, going all the way back to the Mexican-American War, and Henry David Thoreau, who was a Unitarian, who went to prison for that. We have also situations where our General Assembly, which was the annual gathering of Unitarians, and those were Unitarians, who passed resolutions in support of war, especially the two world wars. And there was tension within the movement for those who were strong pacifists who opposed it, and then people who supported it. We have figured out a way to live with that tension. And that is something I feel we need to reclaim in more active ways. But at the same time, pay attention to how the war economy continues to play an insidious role, not just in making the United States of America the most militaristic nation in the world, and out there engaging in ways and supporting and condoning militarism around the world, including occupation in parts of the world like Palestine, for example, but also how the war economy creates a militaristic society within our American society, especially the role of guns and our continued obsession with gun culture. So it is a good question for us to not only wrestle with, but find a way to engage with it. Has the concept of unity in Unitarianism changed over time? If so, how? Wow, that's a great question. Yes, the concept of unity initially within Unitarianism started as the belief in the unity of God, that there is only one God. So Unitarians opposed the doctrine of the Trinity. But as Unitarianism evolved, especially in becoming more expansive in recognizing the wisdom in other religious traditions, as well as welcoming and embracing people who may not necessarily believe in God, the word unity has come more to represent the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And in that sense, to affirm that despite differences, there is a fundamental unity, not uniformity, unity that guides human existence and experience. So that's at least one way in which we can look at how unity has evolved. Now, Unitarian Universalism, as the late Reverend Forrest Church loved to say, is one light, many windows. One light passing through many windows. So there again, you have that concept of unity that has become more universal. They say God is coming and she'll be pissed. Is God coming? And if so, will she be pissed? I think God is already here. And she is totally pissed. People are now saying we are living in apocalyptic times, especially with the climate crisis. And it is true. It does feel that way. But the word apocalypse, from the Greek word, is actually means to reveal, to make open, to let everyone see. And in that sense, we are really seeing what it is that we are doing to ourselves and to our fragile, beautiful planet. And in that sense, God is here challenging us, not just to pay attention, but to do something about it. Implication of the rise of the nuns for religion and Unitarian Universalism. There are huge implications. Do you know what the nuns, not N-U-N-S, but N-O-N-E-S, which is the largest growing number of people, mostly young millennials, who no longer associate with organized religion, consider themselves spiritual but not religious, or very engaged, invested in the world, but don't necessarily see any value in being in a religious community like Cedar Lane. I mean, just look around you. I don't want to point out people, but there are maybe 5 or 6 who fall into that generation who are right here today. So there are implications, but you see, unless we reimagine how we do religion for the 21st century and do it very differently than we have been doing all these years, we're not going to get them to be a part of our religious communities. That's the reality. And until we do that, we're going to be slowly declining, slowly dying, just as other organized religious communities are. And that's the implication that we have to sit with. Okay, I don't want to get caught up in just this set of things. There are 3 other sets of questions. Will UU churches work jointly to drive our messages to a larger audience? Yes, they should. But you are the churches. So you need to figure out how you're going to work together with other UU congregations to get the word out. So I hope you will take that question to be a religious call to action for this year. What is the plan for services when the ministerial staff is on furlough? Now, this is a bit of insider baseball for some folks who are new to us. So we've been having some budgetary challenges, and in an effort to find a way to live within our means and not have a huge deficit this year, the senior staff proposed that we would take a 2-week furlough during the church year, 1 week in the fall and 1 week sometime in the winter. Now, the fall's furlough is going to be in November. And so there is already some anxiety and concern about what would happen. I will say that this is something that I hope the board and the congregation will sit with, figure out. And what is it that that moment is calling you to be and to do during that time? Because, it's not something that we are enthusiastically doing, but felt this was one way we could at least mitigate the pain of having to deal with lesser resources than we actually need to do the important mission and ministry at Cedar Lane. So more later. There are some amazing questions. Let me at least give you a few of the questions. How to talk about racism without offending congregants that they are racist? Could you share a few words, an update on how your family is doing as they enter their 7th year of being in community with us? Where are they in their life's journey? They're doing great. Abhimanyu is in LA. Yashasvi continues in college. Lolita is busy at work, and we're still here. So, what about Cedar Lane's annual program fund contribution, which is our annual tithe to the UUA to support their work? And that has been cut as well as part of our budgetary resources. We'll return to these questions when we have our first town hall later in September. How long will it take to get pronouns included as part of each name tag? That in itself would be a wonderful thing to explore in a service. What can we do to elect a Democrat in 2020? Talk to me. talk to me after the service. Because that's not a question I can address from the pulpit, because of our commitment to the separation of church and state. How to avoid depression where our government sends sick foreigners, children, home in 30 days. I know activism is an answer, but it feels like swimming in molasses. I'm with you. In a world in so much pain, what do you do to find solace and peace? Yes, it is a challenge, isn't it? And what I witness in our ministry today is that we find ourselves ministering to people across the spectrum. Each week, we have people who come here wanting respite, to have an hour of peace and quiet, so that this place would be a refuge, a sanctuary, in order to be able to get some strength to go out into the world to once again face the violence, the inhumanity, and all the other oppressions and injustices that we continue to encounter and be bombarded by. And then we find people who come here seeking transformation and the energy to be challenged to go out and fight the good fight in the world. That is just the span of what ministers are being called to minister to in these times. But a religious community can be some of all those things. Because if we don't take care of ourselves, of what is within, and do that among each other, together, we will not be able to go out into the world to be engaged in the work of justice, in the work of peace, in the work of equity. So we need to cultivate more practices, spiritual practices that allow us, including worship, which is an important spiritual practice for Unitarian Universalists, of attending worship regularly, to be able to do this work intentionally together and going out to transform the world. How to sustain faith when you discover that some of your fellow congregants can be as mean and petty as everyone else. How to sustain faith in Unitarian Universalism when your own UU minister turns out to be a petty, money-grubbing hypocrite. How then to believe in UU principles? So, as one church consultant put it, the trouble with church is because you and I are in it. So, how to sustain faith? By showing up, by being present to one another through that discomfort and the pain and the anger. Because at the end of the day, this is more than just the people who are Cedar Lane. Cedar Lane is more than just the building. Cedar Lane is a living, breathing idea that will exist long after I am gone and you are gone. We hope. And what we are called is to practice faithfulness to that idea. Even if you disagree with some of the things that are happening, even if you don't like what is being said from the pulpit, even if you are incensed that there is too much politics coming from the pulpit, or not enough politics from the pulpit. All of those are valid. But those can't be the main focus, because our work is not to help you feel comfortable, friends. At least that's not why I was called into the ministry. To comfort, yes. To help people feel safe, yes, but not to be comfortable, but to be stretched in ways that you learn to live with your discomfort. Be challenged to grow deeply and widely, within, among, and beyond, and ultimately to serve a life that is much, much larger than our own. To me, that's the meaning, purpose of a religious community. Whatever theological stripe, it doesn't matter, but especially a Unitarian Universalist religious community. And that's what keeps me in this ministry. And I thank you for giving me that privilege and letting me do it. Thank you. Thank you. So let me close with some words from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who in so many ways offered some prophetic statements that continue to resonate and challenge us today. And this one is an excerpt from Beyond Vietnam, that the sermon he preached at the Riverside Church in New York City. Now let us begin. Now let us rededicate ourselves to the long and bitter but beautiful struggle for a new world. This is the calling of the sons and daughters of God, and our brothers and sisters await eagerly for our response. Shall we say the odds are too great? Shall we tell them the struggle is too hard? Will our message be that the forces of American life militate against their arrival as full people and we send our deepest regrets? Or will there be another message of longing, of hope, of solidarity with their yearnings, of commitment to their cause, whatever the cost? The choice is ours. And though we might prefer it otherwise, we must choose in this crucial moment of human history. So may it be. Blessed be. Sister, are we ready to sing us out with "This Land is Your Land"? Please rise in body and or in spirit. The words are on screen.
You all know this song. Let's sing it like we mean it.
This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me in a golden valley. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island.
squares of the city, in the squares of the city, by the shadow of the steeple,
by the relief office, I saw my people. As they stood hungry, I stood there asking,